I'm rich! I'm rich!
We're rich! We did it! We're rich!
We? You and who? Go upstairs. Go upstairs, pack your things, and get out of my house right now!
What?
You're laughing now, Calista said quietly, watching the man she had loved for 9 years raise a crystal glass to a room full of people who had never believed in him until today. She smiled too. She had no idea that smile would be the last peaceful thing she felt for a very long time. If someone handed you everything you ever dreamed of, the contract, the money, the mansion, the recognition, and then told you it would all be gone in 72 hours, would you believe them? Thaddeus Blackwood didn't. That was his first mistake. And if someone spent 9 years pouring her savings, her connections, her reputation, and her sleep into building a man from the ground up, only for him to throw her out like yesterday's newspaper the moment success arrived, what would you do? Stick around for this story, because what Calista Hart did next is something they don't teach in any business school, any law school, or any church on this side of California. Like this video before we go any further, because the ending? You are not ready. Flashback, 9 years earlier. The first time Calista Hart met Thaddeus Blackwood, he was standing outside a coffee shop in Sacramento with a manila folder under his arm, a phone with a cracked screen pressed to his ear, and shoes that had been resoled so many times the leather had started to curl. She noticed the shoes. Most people would have looked away. Calista looked closer. There was something about the way he carried himself, chin up, voice steady, speaking into that broken phone like he was addressing a boardroom, that made her stop walking. He was pitching someone, some investor, some idea. She couldn't hear the details, but she could hear the conviction. When he hung up and caught her watching, he didn't look embarrassed. He looked determined. Bad news? She asked. Temporary setback, he said, and he smiled like a man who had never once entertained the possibility of failure. She should have paid closer attention to that smile, because a man who cannot imagine failing is also a man who cannot imagine being responsible for it. But love has a way of making you interpret warning signs as strengths. They dated for 8 months. They married in a small ceremony in Napa Valley. Her uncle Elias Hawthorne paid for the flowers because Thad's savings account had exactly $412 in it at the time. Calista paid for everything else. She didn't mind. She believed in him. That was her first mistake. No, not a mistake. Believing in someone is never a mistake. Trusting that they will remember who believed in them. That's where it gets complicated. 9 years is a long time to hold something together with your bare hands. Calista was a project coordinator at a mid-size infrastructure consulting firm in Sacramento. She was good at her job, methodical, sharp, the kind of woman who read a contract the way other people read novels, noting every detail, every clause, every loophole. Her boss called her the best set of eyes in the office. Her colleagues called her the fixer. At home, she fixed things too. Thad's first business, a logistics startup, collapsed 18 months in. Calista quietly moved $40,000 from her personal savings account to cover the outstanding vendor debts before creditors came knocking. She didn't make a scene. She sat with him at their kitchen table in their rented apartment in Elk Grove, spread out the papers, and helped him figure out what went wrong. His second venture was a real estate holding company. It limped along for 3 years, never quite dying, never quite thriving. Calista introduced him to 2 of her industry contacts who threw him small contracts to keep the lights on. She proofread every proposal he submitted. She stayed up past midnight, helping him format presentations. She cooked. She cleaned. She encouraged. She waited. And through all of it, she paid attention. She noticed that Thad was brilliant when he was hungry. Truly brilliant. The kind of sharp, instinctive intelligence that could read a room, read a deal, read an opportunity before anyone else saw it coming. But the moment comfort arrived, something shifted in him. He got looser, more reckless, less careful. She noticed. She filed the observation away, and she kept going. Uncle Elias. The turning point came through Calista's uncle. Elias Hawthorne was 63 years old, a former state commerce official who had spent 4 decades building relationships across California's government and private sector landscape. He was not the kind of man who made noise. He was the kind of man who made calls. He and Calista had always been close. After her parents divorced when she was 11, Elias became the steadiest presence in her life. The man who showed up to her school graduations, who read her college application essays, who told her at 17 that she had the sharpest mind in the family and that she had better not waste it trying to fix other people's problems. She had smiled and nodded. Then she married Thad. Elias never said a word against Thad directly. He was too smart for that. But he watched, and he waited. 2 years ago, Calista had come to him with a proposition. The California Department of Transportation was quietly assembling a shortlist for a major infrastructure maintenance contract, a long-term government deal that would involve road network assessments, digital monitoring systems, and compliance consulting across 3 northern counties. The budget was substantial. The requirements were specific. The process was competitive, but merit-based. Thad's holding company has the structure, Calista told her uncle. He's been building the right portfolio. I think he could put together a serious proposal. Elias had looked at her for a long moment over the rim of his coffee cup. You think he's ready? I think the opportunity would make him ready. Elias had nodded slowly. I can make an introduction. Put his name in front of the right people. But Calista, I want you to understand something. I can open a door. I cannot walk through it for him. And if he embarrasses me, I won't be the only one who suffers for it. I know, she said. Do you? Yes, she said. And she meant it. What followed was 6 months of the most intensive work Calista had ever done outside of her own career. She helped Thad build the proposal from scratch. Late nights, early mornings, research, revisions, compliance checklists, budget models, risk assessments. She became his unofficial co-author, his editor, his devil's advocate. When he wanted to overreach, she reined him in. When he undersold his company's capabilities, she pushed him to be bolder. The final document was 63 pages long and cost them $4,000 in professional formatting, compliance legal review, and submission fees, money that came out of Calista's personal account. She didn't mention that part. The committee reviewed 17 proposals. They shortlisted 4. They selected 1. Thaddeus Blackwood's proposal. The contract value, $13,200,000. Payable in structured milestones over 30 months, with the first mobilization payment of $2.4 million released within 30 days of execution. When the letter arrived, Thad stood in their kitchen holding it with both hands, reading it over and over like he couldn't quite make his brain accept what his eyes were seeing. Then he looked up at Calista, and he cried. Full, ugly, shaking tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep and old and tired. The kind that only come out when something you stop believing and suddenly becomes real. Calista held him. She rubbed his back. She whispered that she was proud of him, that she always knew that this was just the beginning. And in that moment, she meant every single word. She did not know that she was holding a man who was about to become someone she had never met. The party was held at the Blackwood family home, a 5-bedroom house in Granite Bay that technically still had a mortgage Calista had been quietly helping to service for the last 3 years. Thad had invited everyone, cousins, college friends, business acquaintances, neighbors, a few local politicians whose names he had collected over the years. His mother, Maeve Blackwood, had personally called the caterers. Maeve was a tall, sharp-boned woman with silver hair and an expression that had never once in Calista's presence suggested warmth. She had tolerated Calista the way wealthy women tolerate weather, as something inconvenient that one endures without acknowledgement. In 9 years, Maeve had never once asked Calista about her work, but she had asked on no fewer than 4 separate occasions when Calista intended to give Thad a child. Tonight, Maeve moved through the crowd like a hostess who had always lived this way. She air-kissed cheeks. She accepted compliments about her son with practiced humility. She arranged herself in photographs with the ease of someone who had been rehearsing this moment in her head for years. At no point did she thank Calista for anything. Calista noticed. She filed it away. She was good at that. Vesper. Calista saw her at 9:47 p.m. She knew the exact time because she had just checked her phone to respond to a message from Uncle Elias. A quiet congratulations, and a reminder that the compliance timeline for the first payment release was tight, that Thad would need to move quickly on the performance bond and the tax clearance documentation. She had looked up from her phone and seen a woman she had never seen before in her life standing at Thad's elbow, laughing at something he had just said. The woman's name, Calista would learn later, was Vesper. She was 31. She had the kind of beauty that announces itself before she enters a room. Dark hair, precise posture, a red dress that had been chosen with the deliberate care of a woman who understood that appearance is a strategy. She was not loud. She was not obvious. She was something more dangerous than either of those things. She was attentive. She leaned slightly toward Thad when he spoke. She laughed at exactly the right moments. She asked him questions that made him feel like the most interesting person in any room he had ever occupied. She had a way of making eye contact that suggested you were the only person worth looking at. Calista watched. She watched the way Thad's shoulders changed when Vesper spoke to him. Looser, more expansive. The way a man's body changes when someone is telling him exactly what he most wants to hear. Calista crossed the room. "I don't think we've met," she said pleasantly, extending her hand. "I'm Calista, Thad's wife." Vesper's smile didn't flicker. "Vesper Lang. I know Thad through a mutual contact in the commercial development space. He's remarkable. You must be so proud." "Every day," Calista said. Vesper held her gaze for exactly one beat longer than was comfortable, then turned back to Thad and said something that made him laugh again. Calista walked to the drinks table, poured herself a glass of sparkling water, and stood very still for a moment. Something cold had moved through her chest. She didn't know what it was yet. She should have left the party then. She should have pulled Thad aside and said, "That woman is not here by accident. She is here with a purpose." But the music was playing, and the room was full of people celebrating her husband's success. And Calista told herself she was being paranoid. She was not being paranoid. Later, much later, when Calista pieced everything together from the text messages she would find on a shared tablet they had both forgotten existed, she learned what Vesper had whispered to Thad that night. Not all at once. Over hours. In fragments, between champagne refills and stolen moments on the back patio. "A man like you has been playing small for too long. That proposal wasn't just good. It was elite. You know that, right? The committee didn't choose you because of connections. They chose you because you're exceptional. But exceptional men get trapped. They get surrounded by people who need them to stay manageable, who need them to stay grateful. You ever think about that? A real winner doesn't ask permission. He acts. He builds. He moves. Some people in your life are investments, and some people are anchors." She didn't say Calista's name. She didn't have to. It was past midnight when Thad found Calista in the kitchen, helping one of the caterer's stacks serving trays. He was drunk, not sloppy. Thad rarely got sloppy. But his eyes had that particular glassy confidence that meant he had crossed the line between loosened and reckless. "Come outside," he said. She followed him to the back patio. The party had thinned. Maeve was inside with her daughters, counting the evening's victories. Vesper was nowhere visible. "I've been thinking," Thad said. "About what? About what comes next?" He looked out at the dark garden, rolling his glass between his palms. "This contract, it's not the ceiling, Calista. It's the floor. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is just the beginning of what I'm going to build." "I know that," she said carefully. "And you will. But the first step is the performance bond. Elias was saying we need to move fast on the documentation, the tax clearance. There's a timeline." Elias. He said the name with a flatness that surprised her. "Right, Thad. I got this contract because I earned it." His voice had changed. Something harder had moved into it. "The committee picked me, not because of Elias, not because of your introductions or your contacts or your help with the proposal. Me." Calista went very still. "Of course," she said quietly. "That's what I said." "Is it?" He turned to look at her. "Because sometimes I feel like you think this is a team project, like you're waiting for your share of the credit." The words landed like something physical. She opened her mouth. She closed it. "I'm going to do things differently now," Thad said. He was looking at the garden again. "I've been thinking about the kind of life I want, the kind of man I need to become. And I think there are some things I need to change." The cold thing in her chest returned. "What kind of things?" He didn't answer immediately. And in the silence, Calista heard the sound of the back door sliding open and Vesper Lang's voice calling Thad's name from inside, saying his cousin wanted a photo. Thad straightened. The glassy confidence snapped back into place like a mask. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said, and he walked inside without looking back. Calista stood on the patio alone. She looked at the dark garden. She thought about 9 years. She thought about $40,000 quietly paid, about 6 months of late nights and proposal revisions and compliance checklists, about a 63-page document that had cost her $4,000, about a man who had cried in her kitchen 2 weeks ago with a letter in his hands. She thought about the way he had just said Elias, flat, dismissive, as though her uncle was an inconvenience rather than the man who had opened the door that changed everything. And something shifted in Calista's heart. Not into anger. Not yet. Into clarity. She went back inside. She refilled her sparkling water. She said goodnight to the remaining guests with a warm smile. She helped the caterers finish clearing the kitchen. And when the last guest had gone and Thad had fallen asleep on the living room couch, still holding his phone, Calista went quietly to the home office. She opened the filing cabinet. She began to look. The contract documents were there, the official executed copy, the compliance timeline, the payment schedule. She photographed every page. She found the joint account statements. She found the business registration documents for Thad's holding company. Documents she had helped prepare, documents that included provisions she had insisted on at the time that Thad had barely noticed. She photographed those too. She found something else. In the bottom drawer, under a folder of old tax returns, there was a burner phone she had never seen before. She picked it up. The screen was locked, but the notification preview was not. 3 messages from a contact, saved as VL. The previews were enough. Calista set the phone down exactly where she had found it. She closed the drawer. She turned off the office light. She went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and breathed slowly for a very long time. Then she took out her own phone and sent a message to Uncle Elias. "I need to talk to you in the morning. Something is happening. Don't confirm anything to anyone about the contract timeline until you hear from me." His reply came 40 seconds later, even at that hour. "I'll be up at 6. Call me." She lay down, but did not sleep. She was already thinking. She was in the kitchen at 6:15 when Thad came downstairs. He was still in last night's clothes. He had the specific combination of confidence and discomfort that belongs to a man who has already decided to do something he knows he shouldn't and has spent the night convincing himself it's justified. He poured himself a coffee. He didn't look at her. "Thad," she said, "we should talk about the performance bond today. The timeline is—" "I know the timeline. The penalty clauses are serious. If the bond isn't submitted within—" "Calista," he set his mug down. He finally looked at her, and the look on his face was something she had never seen before. Not anger, not guilt, but something worse than both. Distance. The look of a man who has already left and just hasn't said it out loud yet. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "You mentioned that. I need space to build this the way I want to build it." He picked his mug back up. "I think it would be better if you had some time away." She stared at him. "Time away? From here?" A pause. "From us." The kitchen was very quiet. "Are you asking me to leave my home?" she said. "I'm asking you to give me space to figure out what the next chapter looks like." "Thad." Her voice was steady. She was surprised by how steady it was. "Are you seriously standing in this kitchen 2 weeks after I spent $4,000 and 6 months of my life helping you secure a $13 million contract and asking me to leave?" He looked at the window. "The contract is mine." 3 words. 3 words that did more damage than any sentence she had ever heard. She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said finally. "It is." She set down her coffee cup. She walked upstairs. She packed 2 bags, clothes, her personal laptop, her passport, the folder of documents she had photographed the night before, and a small external hard drive from her nightstand that Thad had never once noticed. When she came back downstairs, he was standing in the hallway. Vesper Lang was at the front door. At 8:30 in the morning. Calista looked at her. Vesper looked back. That precise, attentive smile. Calista looked at Thad. "Pack your things," he said. His voice was quiet, but it had changed. Vesper was behind him now, and something about that gave him a shape he didn't have on his own. I don't need you anymore. Calista picked up her bags. She looked at him one final time. This man she had rebuilt from the ground up. This man she had cried with and worked for and believed in through 9 years of borrowed faith. And she nodded once. Okay, she said. She walked past Vesper Lang without looking at her. She got her car. She drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and sat for exactly 2 minutes. Then she picked up her phone, called Uncle Elias, and said 4 words that would begin the unraveling of everything Thaddeus Blackwood thought he had just won. He just kicked me out. A long pause. Then Elias said, Are you safe? Yes. Good. His voice had gone very quiet, very precise. The voice she remembered from the years when he ran a government department, and people moved when he spoke. Then pull over somewhere comfortable, because we have a lot to discuss. Calista looked in her rearview mirror at the house she had helped pay for, where a woman in a red dress was standing in the doorway watching her leave. She turned back to the road. 3 days, she thought. Just give me 3 days. 3 days. That's all it took. Not 3 years. Not 3 months. Not even 3 weeks. 72 hours for a man holding $13 million to end up on a Sacramento sidewalk in yesterday's clothes, talking to people who weren't there, begging strangers for something he could no longer name. You want to know how that happens? Stay right here, because this is where the story gets interesting. Calista Hart drove to her cousin Renata's house in Roseville with 2 bags, a folder of photographs, an external hard drive, and the kind of quiet that only comes after something enormous has just broken. Renata met her at the door, took one look at her face, and said nothing. She simply stepped aside, let her in, and put the kettle on. That was the thing about family that actually loved you. They didn't require an explanation before they made space. Calista sat at Renata's kitchen table and called Uncle Elias. He picked up on the first ring. Tell me everything, he said. Start from the party. She told him. All of it. Vesper Lang at Thad's elbow. The back patio conversation. The flat way Thad had said Elias. Like her uncle was a footnote. The burner phone in the bottom drawer. The 3 preview messages from VL. The morning dismissal. Vesper at the front door at 8:30 a.m. Elias listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a pause. The performance bond, he said. Has he submitted it? No. I checked the compliance portal this morning before I left. Nothing filed. The deadline, 14 days from contract execution. The contract was executed 6 days ago. So he has 8 days. 8 days, she confirmed. And the tax clearance certificate needs to accompany it. If both aren't filed together, the first payment gets held. Another pause. Calista. Elias's voice was careful. I want to be precise about something. The committee selected Thad's proposal on its own merit. I made the introduction, but I did not influence the outcome. That is important for my integrity and for yours. Do you understand what I'm saying? I do. Whatever happens next happens because of his choices, not because of anything we engineer. Are we clear? Crystal, she said. Good. A breath. Now, tell me what you took with you when you left. She told him about the photographs, the documents, the hard drive. The hard drive, he said slowly. What's on it? Backup copies of every proposal document, every financial model we built together, the original draft of the compliance timeline. And she paused. 18 months of shared email threads between me and Thad's business account, where I provided advice, edits, strategic input, and introduced him to 2 of the vendors listed in his proposal as key partners. Silence. Calista. Yes. I underestimated you. Most people do, she said. I find it useful. By 10 a.m., Calista was on the phone with Dorian Voss, a family law and civil litigation attorney based in Sacramento, whom Calista had been quietly researching for 3 weeks. Not because she had expected this, because she was the kind of woman who prepared for possibilities she hoped would never arrive. Dorian Voss was 51, had practiced for 23 years, and had a reputation for being the attorney that other attorneys didn't enjoy seeing on the other side of conference table. She was also, not coincidentally, the attorney who had handled Calista's cousin Renata's divorce 4 years ago and recovered assets that Renata's ex-husband had been absolutely certain were untouchable. Calista laid out the situation in 20 minutes. Joint assets. The house, technically owned by the LLC they had formed together 2 years ago on Calista's recommendation, an LLC in which she held 40% equity. The shared accounts. Her documented financial contributions to Thad's businesses over 9 years. The proposal assistance. The vendor introductions. The $4,000 in submission costs that had come directly from her personal account, paid to a legal compliance firm whose invoice was still in her email. Dorian listened, made notes, asked 3 sharp questions. Then she said, "File date." "Today," Calista said. "As soon as possible." Dorian said, "I'll have the initial filing ready by this afternoon. One more thing. The LLC that holds the property. Who has signing authority? Both of us. Jointly. Then no assets can be moved or liquidated without your signature." A pause. "He doesn't know that, does he?" "He never read the operating agreement," Calista said. "I wrote it." There was a brief silence on the line. Then Dorian Voss said something that might have been the closest she ever came to a compliment. "Mrs. Blackwood, I think we're going to work very well together." While Calista was sitting at her cousin's kitchen table, building a legal architecture around everything she and Thad had built together, Thaddeus Blackwood was celebrating. The house felt different without Calista in it. Thad noticed this, but interpreted it as freedom rather than loss. The air seemed lighter. The room seemed larger. He moved through the kitchen with an expansiveness that he hadn't felt in years, and he told himself this was what success was supposed to feel like. Vesper was already making herself comfortable. She had arrived the previous evening with 2 pieces of luggage and a bottle of Clase Azul tequila, and she had taken over the master bedroom with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had done this kind of thing before. By morning, she had rearranged the nightstand, found a drawer for her things, and was using Calista's favorite coffee mug without a flicker of hesitation. Thad noticed that too. He told himself it meant nothing. "Today's the day we celebrate properly," Vesper said, pouring coffee and leaning against the counter with the ease of a woman who had already decided she lived there. "Not some crowded party. Just us. We should go to Tahoe. I know a place. I have compliance paperwork," Thad said, but even as he said it, he felt the pull of the alternative. The performance bond. "Thad." Vesper set down her mug and looked at him the way she always looked at him, like he was the only thing in the room worth looking at. "You just won a $13 million government contract. You have 8 days before any of that is urgent. You have been grinding for years. You have been careful for years. You have been responsible and patient," and she paused, "managed for years." The word managed landed precisely where she intended it to. "One day," she said. "You've earned one day." Thad thought about the performance bond. He thought about Elias Hawthorne's compliance timeline. He thought about Callista's voice that morning. Steady, careful, precise, saying the penalty clauses are serious. He put his phone in his pocket. "Let's go to Tahoe," he said. That was the first brick pulled from the foundation. Vesper Lang was not stupid. This is important to understand. She was not a cartoon villain. She was not motivated by cruelty for its own sake. She was a woman who had learned very early that the fastest way to move through the world was to find men at the moment of their greatest expansion. That precise, intoxicating window when they first touch money or power or recognition, and to make herself indispensable in that moment. She had done it twice before. Both times she had extracted what she needed and moved on before the inevitable collapse. The difference this time was that she had misjudged the timeline. Because Thaddeus Blackwood did not collapse slowly. He collapsed like a building with the wrong supports, suddenly, completely, and taking everything around him down with the fall. The mobilization payment, $2.4 million, hit Thad's business account at 2:17 p.m. on day 1. Thad and Vesper were somewhere on the I-80 headed toward Lake Tahoe when the bank notification arrived on his phone. He showed Vesper the screen. She looked at the number. Then she looked at him with an expression that Thad, in his current state, read as admiration. What it actually was calculation. "That's real," she said quietly. "That's real," he confirmed. She leaned across the center console and kissed him on the cheek. Then she pulled up something on her phone and said, "There's a car dealership in Roseville. They have a Bentley Bentayga on the floor. I've always wanted to see one up close. Thad was quiet for a moment. $2.4 million. He had never seen a number that large attached to his name before. We're going to Tahoe, he said. Of course, she agreed. We could stop on the way back. They stopped on the way back. Thad Blackwood drove home in a Bentley Bentayga that cost $340,000, paid for by a cashier's check drawn on his business account. He told himself it was an investment in his image, that successful men drove successful cars. That Vesper was right, that this was what the next chapter looked like. He did not think about performance bonds. He did not think about tax clearance certificates. He did not think about the 8 days that had just become 7. While Thad was signing paperwork for a car he had no business buying, Calista was doing 3 things simultaneously. First, she was on a video call with Dorian Voss reviewing the initial divorce filing documents, which had been drafted with surgical precision to protect every joint asset and establish Calista's documented financial contributions as grounds for equitable distribution claims that would make Thad's eventual attorneys significantly uncomfortable. Second, she was composing a careful, measured message to 2 of the vendors she had personally introduced to Thad's proposal, suppliers who had been listed as key partners in the contract documentation. The message didn't say anything alarming. It simply reminded them that any contractual commitments they made with Blackwood Holdings in the coming days should include standard due diligence protections, given the early stage of the contract's implementation phase. She signed it with her professional title and her direct contact information. Both vendors responded within the hour. Third, and this was the quiet one, the one that required the most stillness, she sent a single text message to Thad. I hope you're okay. I need you to know that whatever is happening between us, the compliance timeline is real. The performance bond and tax clearance need to be filed together before the 8-day deadline. Please don't let Vesper convince you those things can wait. I'm telling you this because I still believe the man who earned that contract is somewhere in there. That's all. She stared at the message for a moment before sending it. Then she sent it. His response came 4 hours later. Handle your own business. She read it once, set the phone face down on Renata's kitchen table, and went back to work. On day 2, Thaddeus Blackwood spent money the way a man spends money when he has spent his entire life being careful and suddenly believes he never has to be careful again. It started with Maeve. His mother arrived at the house at 10 a.m. with her 2 daughters, Thad's sisters, Presley and Wren, and Thad, standing in his new life with Vesper beside him and $2.4 million in his account, felt the old hunger to impress the people who had watched him struggle. He told them to pick something. Maeve picked a new kitchen, full renovation, the kind she had been describing for years from magazine clippings, Italian marble countertops, custom cabinetry, a range that cost more than most people's cars. She called a contractor she had already been speaking to. The estimate was $220,000. Thad signed the deposit check without reading the full scope. Presley wanted a car. Wren wanted money for a business idea she had been developing. Thad gave them both what they asked for, not because he had reviewed the numbers, but because Vesper was standing slightly behind him with that attentive look on her face, and he wanted to feel large in front of her. By noon, he had spent $600,000. By 4 p.m., Vesper had suggested they open a separate investment account. Something aggressive, she said, something that would work for him while he focused on building. She knew a fund manager, she said, someone who worked exclusively with new money clients who needed fast returns. I need to think about it, Thad said. Of course, Vesper said. Just don't think too long. These windows close. At 6 p.m., Thad transferred $800,000 to an account whose documentation he did not read carefully enough. Day 2 ended with Thad Blackwood feeling more powerful than he had ever felt in his life. He did not notice that Vesper slept with her phone face down all night. He did not notice that she was quieter than usual at breakfast. He did not notice that she had started referring to her plans and her next steps in ways that no longer included the word we. Calista noticed, not because she was watching Thad directly, but because Renata's neighbor's daughter worked at the bank branch where Thad held his business account. And small cities have long memories and longer conversations, and by mid-afternoon the broad shape of what was happening had found its way, through 3 separate people, to Renata's kitchen. A Bentley, a kitchen renovation deposit, 2 large transfers. Calista did not feel satisfied. She felt something closer to grief, the particular grief of watching someone prove your worst fears right. She called Dorian Voss. How quickly can we move on the joint LLC assets? The filing is already in. The LLC operating agreement gives you injunctive protection. He cannot liquidate or transfer LLC-held assets without your signature. The house is protected. The business accounts are not LLC-held. No, Dorian said carefully. Those are his to do with as he chooses. I know. A pause. I'm not trying to stop him, Dorian. I just want to make sure I'm not standing in the rubble when it falls. You won't be, Dorian said. I've made sure of that. Day 3. The government's first call came at 8:04 a.m. on day 3. A compliance officer from the California Department of Transportation Contract Management Office. Professional, polite, precise. The performance bond had not been filed. The tax clearance certificate had not been submitted. The joint filing deadline was now 5 days away. But given the size of the mobilization payment that had already been released, the department was conducting a routine check-in to confirm the contractor was on track. Thad took the call in the kitchen, still in his robe, Vesper asleep upstairs. He said the right things. He said he was on top of it. He said the documents were being finalized. He hung up and stood very still. Then he called the compliance attorney he had spoken to 3 months ago during the proposal process, a man named Rourke, based in downtown Sacramento. Rourke picked up and immediately said, I've been expecting your call. Where are we on the performance bond application? I need to get started on it, Thad said. A pause on the line. Thad, the bond requires 3 things. A clean tax clearance certificate, a certified financial statement from your business account showing sufficient liquidity, and a surety company endorsement. The surety company requires the financial statement to show a minimum reserve. A pause. How much of the mobilization payment is currently liquid in your business account? Thad thought about the Bentley, the kitchen renovation deposit, the 2 transfers. A cold sweat broke across his shoulders. Let me check the balance, he said. He checked. After the Bentley, after the renovation deposit, after his mother and sisters, after the transfer to Vesper's fund manager. The balance was $412,000. The same number, almost to the dollar, that had been in his account the day he met Calista. Thad, Rourke said carefully, the surety minimum for a contract of this size is typically 30% of the total contract value. That's approximately $3.9 million in demonstrable reserves. Silence. What happens, Thad said slowly, if the bond isn't filed? The contract has a non-performance clause, Rourke said. If compliance documentation isn't received within the deadline, the department can issue a cure notice. If the cure isn't resolved within 48 hours of the notice, the contract can be terminated for cause. A pause. Thad, the mobilization payment would need to be returned. The kitchen was very quiet. All of it, Thad said. All of it, Rourke said, plus applicable penalties. Thad set his phone down on the counter. He thought about the Bentley in the driveway. He thought about Vesper's fund manager. He thought about the kitchen renovation deposit. He thought about Calista's voice 6 days ago, saying the penalty clauses are serious. He thought about Callista's text message. Please don't let Vesper convince you those things can wait. He called the number for the investment account, where he had sent $800,000. It rang 4 times. A recorded message. The number you have dialed is not currently in service. He called it again. Same message. He sat down on the kitchen floor. What followed happened fast. Collapse always does, once it starts. The bank called at 10 a.m. The large outgoing transfers had triggered an automated fraud review. The account had been flagged. Pending transactions were frozen. A hold had been placed on all outgoing payments pending review, which meant the kitchen renovation contractor's deposit check had bounced. Maeve called at 10:15, furious. Thad's business partners, 2 men he had brought in as subcontractors and who had been counting on early payment, called at 11, asking about delayed deposits. He called Vesper's phone at 11:30. It rang twice, then a flat, calm voicemail message. He called it again. Same thing. He went upstairs. Her luggage was gone. The Calista Azul tequila bottle was on the nightstand, empty. The drawer she had claimed for herself was empty. She had not taken the coffee mug. On the bathroom counter, written on a post-it note in her precise handwriting, "A real winner doesn't get caught holding someone else's lesson. Good luck, Thad." By noon on day 3, Thaddeus Blackwood had lost the following: the investment transfer, $800,000, gone with a phone number that no longer existed, and a fund manager whose name, Thad would discover, matched no licensed financial professional in the state of California. The bank account, frozen pending review, which meant access to the remaining $400,000 was suspended indefinitely. The contract, the Department of Transportation issued a cure notice at 2 p.m., formally notifying Blackwood Holdings that failure to file the required compliance documentation within 48 hours would result in contract termination and a formal demand for return of the mobilization payment. The family may have called back at 1 p.m. and left a voicemail that would have been devastating in any other context, blaming Thad for embarrassing the family, for the bounce check, for not listening, for Calista, and then abruptly said that she and Presley and Wren were going to stay with Presley's in-laws until this was sorted, and that he should not contact them until he had something sensible to say. The friends, word travels in Sacramento. By mid-afternoon, 3 people who had been at the celebration party had heard enough fragments of what was happening that they stopped returning his calls. By 4 p.m., Thad had been awake for 31 hours. He had not eaten since the previous evening. He had made 47 phone calls, of which 6 had been answered and none had resolved anything. He was sitting on the front steps of the Granite Bay house in the same clothes he had slept in the afternoon sun, when something inside him simply gave way. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way a man gives way when there is nothing left to hold on to and nothing left to perform for. He started talking, to nobody in particular, to the driveway, to the Bentley parked in it, gleaming, enormous, $340,000 a monument to a decision made in a car showroom on the way back from Lake Tahoe. A neighbor walking a dog paused across the street. Then another. Someone took out a phone. Calista. She got a call from Renata at 4:15. Someone sent me a video, Renata said. She was careful, gentle. Calista. It's Thad. Calista watched the video. 37 seconds. Thad on the front steps, disheveled, talking to the air, gesturing at the Bentley, saying something that the camera couldn't quite pick up. She watched it once. She put her phone down. She sat with it for a long time. This was not satisfaction. Satisfaction would have felt clean. This felt complicated and heavy and sad in a way she hadn't expected, because somewhere underneath everything that had happened in the last 3 days was the memory of a man in a kitchen holding a letter with both hands, crying with the relief of finally becoming what he had always believed he could be. She had loved that man. She just hadn't known that man and Thaddeus Blackwood were not entirely the same person. She picked up her keys. She found him still on the steps. The neighbor with the phone had gone. The street was quiet. The Bentley sat in the driveway like a punchline to a joke nobody had found funny. Thad looked up when she got out of the car. Something moved across his face. Complex and broken and impossible to name entirely. Calista, he said. His voice was wrecked. She stopped in front of him and looked at him. This man she had rebuilt from $412 and a cracked phone screen. This man she had carried through 9 years of borrowed faith, and she felt the full weight of everything they had both lost. Not just what she had lost, what he had thrown away. Vesper is gone, he said. The money, he stopped. The contract, he stopped again. His hands were shaking. I don't know what to do. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said quietly. Can you? He started to rise from the step. Calista, if you could just help me figure out the bond. The deadline is still. Thad. He stopped. She crouched down so she was level with him. She looked him directly in the eyes. You didn't lose your money in 3 days, she said. And her voice was steady and clear and absolutely without cruelty, which somehow made it land harder than cruelty ever could. You lost it the day you mistook my loyalty for weakness. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I'm going to call an ambulance, she said. Because you need to sleep and eat and speak to someone qualified. That's what a decent person does, and I am still a decent person regardless of what you did. She's to back up, but I am not going to help you fix this. I'm not able to do that. Not because I want you to suffer, but because this is yours, Thad. The choice to throw me out was yours. The Bentley was yours. Vesper was yours. Every single thing that happened in the last 3 days was a choice you made. She took out her phone. She dialed. While she waited for the dispatcher to answer, she said one more thing. She said it quietly, like a door closing. The committee chose you because you were exceptional. That was real. I need you to know that. Whatever comes next, that was real. Then she gave the dispatcher the address and described what she was seeing. She waited until the ambulance arrived. She answered the paramedics' questions briefly and accurately. And when Thad was being helped inside, when he turned back to look at her one final time with an expression she would carry in some form for the rest of her life, she gave him one small nod. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. The acknowledgement that someone who had once been worth believing in deserves, even after they have made themselves very hard to believe in. Then she walked back to her car. She drove to Renata's house. She sat at the kitchen table. Renata put the kettle on without a word. And Calista Hart, who had rebuilt one man from nothing and was now free to build herself from everything she had always had, picked up her phone and called Dorian Voss. "We're ready to proceed," she said. "I'll send you the final documents tonight," Dorian said. "Good." She looked out Renata's kitchen window at the ordinary street, the ordinary afternoon light, the ordinary, unremarkable beauty of a life that was entirely hers again. One more thing. Yes. The LLC, the one with the house. What's my equity position once the divorce filing processes? A brief pause. 40% on paper, Dorian said. But given your documented contributions, your proposal assistance records, your 9 years of financial support, we'll argue for significantly more. Calista nodded. Good, she said again. She hung up. She thought about Thad on those steps. She thought about Vesper's post-it note on the bathroom counter. She thought about Uncle Elias's voice. I can open a door. I cannot walk through it for him. She thought about a man outside a coffee shop in Sacramento years ago with a cracked phone and resold shoes and a voice like a boardroom, and the way she had stopped walking because something about his conviction had caught her. She had been right about him once. He had just been wrong about himself. And now she had the rest of her life to be right about someone who mattered even more. Herself. He earned that contract. Truly earned it. And he burned it down in 72 hours. Not because of bad luck. Not because of Vesper. Not because the system failed him. Because the moment success arrived, he confused loyalty with limitation and wisdom with weakness. Vesper didn't destroy Thaddeus Blackwood. She just handed him a match. He struck it himself. Asterisk. Calista didn't need revenge. She needed clarity. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply step aside and let someone demonstrate exactly who they are. She walked away with her integrity, her documentation, her equity, and her future. He's still on those steps in her memory. That's enough. If you were Calista, what would your final words to him have been? Drop them in the comments. I want to read every single one. And if this story hit different, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. See you in the next one.